My mother-in-law said I faked my pregnancy for attention, so I showed the family the messages where she begged my husband to demand a paternity test. The dinner table went silent. My husband's face turned white. His father set down his fork. I'd spent 6 months enduring her comments. The passive-aggressive questions about whether I was sure about my due date. The suggestions that I looked too small, then too big, then not glowing enough. She'd post articles about phantom pregnancies on her social media, tagging me. She'd send my husband links about paternity fraud statistics at midnight. When I was 12 weeks along, she cornered me at their house. She whispered that I'd trapped him, that she knew girls like me. I was too shocked to respond. By 16 weeks, she was telling relatives I might be lying, that maybe I'd lost the baby and was pretending. My husband kept saying she was just worried, protective, adjusting to the news. He made excuses every time. Then I found the texts. She'd been messaging him for weeks, telling him to demand proof, suggesting I'd cheated, sending him clinic information for prenatal paternity tests. She wrote that he needed to know the truth before it was too late, that I could ruin his life, that the baby might not be his. My husband never told me. He kept deleting the messages and pretending everything was fine, but his phone backed up to our shared tablet, and I saw everything. At 19 weeks during a family dinner, she made another comment. Something about how convenient my pregnancy was after his promotion at work. I'd had enough. I excused myself, went to the car, and forwarded every screenshot to the family group chat. Every message, every accusation, every suggestion that I was a liar, a manipulator, a gold digger carrying someone else's child. Then I walked back inside and sat down. Within seconds, phones started buzzing around the table. My father-in-law's expression shifted from confusion to fury. My husband's sister gasped. His brother actually stood up from his chair. My mother-in-law grabbed her phone, saw what I'd sent, and her face went from pink to gray. She stammered, asking where I'd gotten those messages, claiming they were private conversations. My husband finally spoke. He asked if she'd really done this, if she'd been telling him to doubt his own wife. His voice cracked. She started backpedaling immediately, claiming she was just concerned, that she'd been taken out of context, that I was being too sensitive during a delicate time. But everyone had read the messages. There was no spinning her way out of 3 months of documented poison. The family fractured that night. His siblings stopped speaking to her. His father moved into their guest room. My husband spiraled into guilt for not telling me, for protecting her, for letting it go on so long. We started therapy. But his mother launched a counterattack. She told people I'd manipulated the screenshots, that I was trying to isolate her son from his family. She started a whisper campaign at her church, painting herself as the victim of a cruel, vindictive daughter-in-law who couldn't handle a little motherly concern. 2 weeks later, she showed up at my workplace, waited in the parking lot until my shift ended. When I walked to my car, she was leaning against my driver's door. She said we needed to talk. Her eyes were cold. I told her to leave. She refused. Said she wouldn't be pushed out of her son's life by someone like me. That's when she said the thing that changed everything. She hissed that she knew what I was really doing, and that she had proof that would destroy me. I froze. She smiled and walked away. That night, I found an envelope taped to our front door. Inside were photos. Old photos from my past that I thought nobody had. Pictures I'd buried years ago. Things I'd never told my husband about. Things that, if they came out now, would ruin everything I'd built. There was no note, just the photos and a single business card. A lawyer's card. I stood there shaking, knowing exactly what this meant. She'd hired someone to dig into my history, and whatever they found, she was ready to use it. I sat on the porch steps for 20 minutes before I could move. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. The photos showed me at 19, before I'd changed my last name, before I'd moved 3 states away and reinvented myself, before I'd met my husband and built this carefully constructed life where nobody knew where I came from or what I'd done to survive. The lawyer's card listed an address downtown, specializing in family law and private investigations. I called my husband from the porch. He was at therapy. Left a voicemail telling him we needed to talk tonight. Urgent. Then I sat there until the sun went down, trying to figure out how to explain 7 years of lies. He came home around 8. Found me at the kitchen table with the photos spread out in front of me. He asked what it was, picking one up. It showed me with bleached blonde hair, wearing clothes I'd donated years ago, standing outside a building I'd promised myself I'd never think about again. I told him we needed to talk. He sat down slowly, looked at each photo. There were 12 total. Me with different hair colors, different names on different documents, a police report from when I was 20, a restraining order I'd filed against someone whose face I could still see in nightmares, records showing I'd changed my name legally when I was 21, social media accounts I deleted but apparently hadn't been thorough enough about. He asked who it was, pointing at me in the photos. I said it was me, before I met him. The silence stretched. I watched him process it, saw the confusion turn to hurt, turn to anger. He asked if I'd lied about my name. I told him I'd changed it legally, that it wasn't a lie. He wanted to know what else I'd lied about. Everything came out then. How I'd grown up in a town I never talked about with parents who'd kicked me out at 18. How I'd spent 2 years doing things I was ashamed of just to survive. How I'd gotten involved with someone dangerous. Someone who'd put me in the hospital twice before I finally got away. How I'd moved across the country, changed everything about myself, and started over. How I'd built a new life from nothing because going back wasn't an option. He asked why I hadn't told him. His voice was quiet, hurt. I explained that people judge, that I'd wanted to be someone different, someone better, someone who deserved him. He stared at me for a long time. Then he stood up, grabbed his keys, and left. Didn't say where he was going. I sat at that table until midnight before I finally went to bed. He came home around 2 in the morning. I heard him sleep on the couch. The next morning, he was gone before I woke up. Left a note saying he needed time to think. That was Thursday. By Friday, his mother had somehow heard about our fight. She called me, asking if we were having marital problems already, her voice dripping fake concern. She said it was so sad, especially in my condition. I hung up. Then my phone rang again. The lawyer from the business card. He called me Ms. Kendrick, using my current last name, then asked if he should say Ms. Valente instead. My old name, the one I'd left behind. He said his client would like to arrange a meeting, tomorrow, 2 o'clock, his office. I asked what would happen if I didn't come. He explained that the photos, along with the full investigation report, would be shared with my husband's family and my employer, and anyone else who might be interested in knowing who I really was. I agreed to the meeting. Spent Friday night researching the lawyer. He worked for a firm that specialized in ugly divorces and custody battles, the kind that got nasty, the kind where people aired every piece of dirty laundry to win. My mother-in-law had hired the best. Saturday morning, I got ready like I was going to war. Professional clothes, hair pulled back. The version of myself I'd perfected over 7 years. The one who looked like she had her life together. I drove downtown and parked 3 blocks away because I couldn't afford the garage. Walked into a building with marble floors and too much glass. The receptionist showed me to a conference room. The lawyer was already there. Mid-50s, expensive suit, the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. He thanked me for coming. I asked where she was. He said his client preferred not to attend. She felt the conversation might be more productive this way. He opened a folder. Inside was everything. My entire history, documented and organized. He commented on how I'd built quite a life for myself. New name, new city, new identity. Very impressive. I asked what she wanted. He said it depended on me. He slid a document across the table. His client was willing to keep this information private, in exchange for certain concessions. I read the document. It was a contract. If I signed, she would destroy the investigation report and all copies of the photos. But in return, I had to agree to several conditions. I would admit to my husband that I'd trapped him with the pregnancy. I would agree to a paternity test after the baby was born. If the test proved the child was his, I would grant her unlimited access to the grandchild. I would never prevent her from seeing her son or grandchild. And I would publicly apologize to her for my behavior at the family dinner. I asked what would happen if I didn't sign. He explained that all of this would become public. My husband would learn everything. My in-laws would know who I really was. And his client would fight for custody of the child on grounds that I was an unfit mother with a history of violence and instability. The police report. From when I'd hit my ex-boyfriend with a lamp after he'd choked me unconscious. I'd been arrested too, even though I was the one with bruises. The charges were dropped, but the arrest was still on record. She'd use it against me. I stood up and told him I'd think about it. He said I had until Monday. After that, the information goes public regardless. I drove home in a daze, found my husband's car in the driveway. He was inside, sitting in the same spot I'd been 2 nights ago. He said we needed to talk. I said I knew. He told me he'd talk to his mom. My heart stopped. I asked what she told him. He said she told him I came from nothing, that I'd lied about my past, that I wasn't who I said I was. He looked up at me. His eyes were red. He'd been crying. He asked if it was true. I asked what exactly she'd said. He explained that she'd told him I'd changed my name, that I had a criminal record, that I'd been lying to him since we met. He wanted to know if any of that was true. I sat down across from him and told him some of it was. Not the way she was telling it. He asked me to tell him the truth, all of it. So I did. Every detail I'd left out before. The boyfriend who'd beaten me, the charges that were dropped, the years I'd spent rebuilding myself, the name change that wasn't about hiding, but about becoming someone new, someone who wasn't a victim anymore. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. He asked why I hadn't just told him. I explained that I was afraid he'd look at me differently, like I was damaged, like I was someone to fix or pity. He said he wouldn't have. I told him everyone does. He reached across the table and took my hand, saying he wasn't everyone. We sat there for a while. Then I showed him the contract his mother's lawyer had sent. Watched his face change as he read it. He asked if she'd really done this. I said she was giving me until Monday to decide. Sign it or she releases everything. He read it again. Then he pulled out his phone and called her. Put it on speaker. She answered on the second ring, saying she was glad he'd called, that they needed to discuss things. He interrupted, asking what the hell was wrong with her. His voice was sharp. Angry in a way I'd never heard. He said she'd hired a private investigator to dig up dirt on his wife. Silence. Then she said she was protecting him. He said she was blackmailing her, threatening to destroy her reputation if she didn't give her control over their lives. She insisted that I'd lied to him about everything, that he deserved to know who I really was. He said he knew who I was, that I was his wife, the mother of his child, and that I trusted him enough to tell him the truth before she could weaponize it. She said I was manipulating him, asking if he couldn't see that. He said the only person manipulating anyone was her, and it was done. They were done. He hung up. Then he looked at me and told me not to sign it, that we'd figure this out together. Monday came. I didn't sign the contract. By Tuesday, the investigation report showed up in my work email. Sent anonymously, but I knew who it was from. My supervisor called me into her office. She said she'd received some concerning information. I said it was about my past. She confirmed, looking uncomfortable. She asked if it was true that I'd been arrested for assault. I explained that the charges were dropped. It was self-defense. She said she understood, but that I'd listed a different name on my employment application. She asked if that was correct. I confirmed that I'd changed my name legally 7 years ago, before I applied there. She pointed out that I hadn't disclosed my previous name or the arrest on my background check. I explained that the arrest was expunged. I wasn't required to disclose it. She looked at the report again. She mentioned that it also listed several other jobs under my previous name, jobs I hadn't listed on my resume. I'd left those off intentionally. Waitressing jobs where I'd been paid under the table, a brief stint at a bar where the owner had been arrested for money laundering, work I'd done to survive but didn't want to explain. I told her I'd listed all relevant work experience. She said she needed some time to review this. Until then, I was suspended pending investigation. I cleaned out my desk that afternoon, drove home and found my mother-in-law's car in our driveway. She was sitting on the porch steps. She said we needed to talk. I told her we had nothing to say to each other. She said she wasn't trying to hurt me. She was trying to protect her son. I asked if destroying his wife was protection. She stood up and said she was showing him who I really was. Before it was too late. She said I wasn't good enough for him. Never was. Girls like me, from backgrounds like mine, we always drag people down. I told her to get off my property. She said he deserved better. Someone from a good family. Someone he could trust. I reminded her that he married me, not her. And he knew everything now. All her digging did was show him what kind of person she really was. Her expression hardened. She said this wasn't over, that the baby wasn't even born yet. Once it arrived, she'd make sure a court saw all of this. She'd fight for custody. She'd prove I was unfit. I asked based on what? That I escaped an abusive relationship? That I changed my name and started over? That I survived? She said it was based on my lies, my criminal record, my unstable past. She said no judge would give a child to someone like me when there's a perfectly good grandmother available. My husband's car pulled up then. He got out, saw his mother, and his face went cold. He asked what she was doing there. She said she was talking to his wife, trying to make her understand. He asked what she needed to understand, that she was willing to destroy their family to get her way. He walked past her, stood next to me, and told her they were done. That meant she didn't come to their house. She didn't contact me. She didn't contact him. She said she was his mother. He said I was his wife, the one he chose. If she couldn't respect that, then she wasn't welcome in their lives, or their child's life. She looked between us. Then she smiled, cold, calculating. She said we'd regret this, both of us. When the baby was born and the truth came out, we'd realize she was right. And by then, it would be too late. She left. My husband and I stood on the porch and watched her drive away. I said she wasn't going to stop. He said he knew. I said she was going to keep digging, keep pushing, keep trying to destroy me. He said then, we fight back. He put his arm around me and said we'd do it together. The next few weeks were hell. My mother-in-law filed a formal complaint with the medical board about my suspended employment, claiming I was a danger to patients. She sent the investigation report to my husband's employer, suggesting he'd been hiding information about his wife. She called Child Protective Services and filed a report claiming I was unstable and posed a risk to the unborn baby. CPS showed up at our door on a Thursday afternoon. 2 caseworkers, clipboard, concerned expressions. They said they'd received a report about concerns for the welfare of an unborn child. We let them in, answered their questions, showed them our home, our finances, our medical records. The investigator asked about my past. I told her everything. She made notes, said she'd have to do a full investigation, which could take several weeks. I asked my husband what would happen if she found something. He said she wouldn't, because there was nothing to find. I wasn't dangerous. I wasn't unstable. I was someone who survived something terrible and built a life anyway, but I couldn't shake the fear. My mother-in-law had resources, connections, money for lawyers who knew how to make someone look bad on paper, and I had a past that, when presented a certain way, could seem suspicious. A name change, an arrest, even though charges were dropped, jobs I'd left off my resume, a history I'd tried to bury. The CPS investigation dragged on. My employment suspension became a termination. My boss apologized, said corporate made the decision based on the background check discrepancies. I couldn't get hired anywhere else. Not with an active CPS case and an investigation report floating around. We started burning through savings. My husband picked up extra shifts, but it wasn't enough to cover both the mortgage and the medical bills from the pregnancy. I was 28 weeks along by then, high risk because of the stress. My doctor recommended bed rest, which meant no work, even if I could find it. My mother-in-law sent care packages to the house. Baby clothes, supplies, all with notes about how she just wanted to help. My husband sent them all back. Then she showed up at his office, caused a scene in the lobby, crying about how her son was pushing her away, and she just wanted to be a grandmother. His boss called him in, suggested he resolve his family issues before they impacted his work. My husband said that night that she was trying to get him fired. I said I knew. He said if he lost his job, we'd lose the house. We'd lose everything. I apologized, saying this was all because of me. He said no, this was because of her. And we weren't giving in. But the pressure was crushing us. My husband started having panic attacks. I couldn't sleep. The baby's movements felt different, like even she could sense the chaos. My doctor warned me that the stress was dangerous, that I needed to find a way to calm down or risk early labor. At 32 weeks, I went into preterm labor. My husband rushed me to the hospital at 2 in the morning. The doctors stopped the contractions, but I had to stay for observation. 3 days in a hospital bed, hooked up to monitors, while nurses checked on me every hour. My mother-in-law found out somehow, showed up at the hospital with flowers and tears. She said she'd heard I was there and was so worried. She tried to come into my room. The nurses stopped her. My husband had put a note in my chart. No visitors except him. She stood outside my door and cried, loud enough for me to hear, telling the nurses she just wanted to make sure her grandchild was okay, that her son was keeping her away for no reason, that I'd turned him against his own mother. One of the nurses came in after. She said my mother-in-law seemed very concerned. I said she was the reason I was there. The nurse looked uncomfortable, didn't push it, but I could tell she was wondering, probably thought I was being overdramatic, that I was the problem, not the crying woman in the hallway who just wanted to be involved. I went home after 3 days. Strict bed rest until delivery. My husband set up the spare bedroom downstairs so I wouldn't have to use stairs. He moved his work laptop down, took calls from the makeshift office so he could be nearby. We existed in this strange bubble, just us, waiting. My phone rang constantly. Numbers I didn't recognize. I stopped answering. Then the voicemails started. Her friends from church calling to say they were praying for our family. Relatives I'd never met asking if everything was okay. All of them concerned. All of them wondering what was really going on. She'd started a narrative that her son had married someone unstable, that I was keeping him from his family, that she was being pushed out of her grandchild's life by a controlling, manipulative woman who'd trapped her son with a pregnancy. Some people believed her. I could see it in the way they looked at us at my husband's family events. The ones we still attended because he refused to let her drive us into complete isolation. His sister pulled me aside at one event. She asked quietly if it was true. I asked what she meant. She said their mom claimed I'd changed my name because I was running from something. I explained that I'd changed my name because I wanted to start over. Clean slate. She said their mom claimed I had a criminal record. I told her I was arrested once. The charges were dropped. It was self-defense. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said she believed me. But not everyone would. She was right. The family was divided. Half thought my mother-in-law was justified in her concerns. Half thought she was being controlling and manipulative. Every gathering became tense. People choosing sides. Whispered conversations that stopped when we walked in. My husband's brother was the worst. He'd always been close to their mother. Defended her constantly. He said one night that she was just trying to protect him, that we couldn't blame her for being worried. My husband asked what she was worried about. His wife hadn't done anything wrong. His brother said I'd lied about my past, that it wasn't nothing. My husband said I'd survived my past, that it was everything. They didn't speak for a month after that. More fractures in the family, more people forced to choose. And through it all, my mother-in-law played the victim. The concerned mother being pushed away by her son's terrible wife. The grandmother being denied her rightful place in her grandchild's life. At 36 weeks, the CPS investigation finally concluded. The caseworker called to inform us. She said they'd found no evidence of risk to the child. The case was closed. I cried. My husband held me. We'd won that battle at least. But the war was far from over. My mother-in-law showed up the next day, let herself in with a key my husband had taken back months ago. She'd apparently made a copy. I was lying on the couch when she walked into the living room. She said we needed to talk. I reached for my phone and told her to get out, or I was calling the police. She said she wasn't there to fight. She was there to make things right. She sat down in the chair across from me, uninvited. She said she'd been thinking about everything that happened, and she realized she may have overreacted. I asked if she meant may have. She said she was scared. For her son. For her future grandchild. She let that fear drive her to do things she wasn't proud of. I stared at her, waiting for the catch. There was always a catch with her. She continued saying she wanted to propose a truce, for the baby's sake. We didn't have to be friends, but we could be civil, for the family. I asked what she wanted. She said just a chance. To be a grandmother. She promised she'd respect our boundaries. No more investigators, no more lawyers. Just a fresh start. It sounded too good to be true, because it was. I asked what the exchange was. She called it a mutual agreement. In exchange, we'd forget all this unpleasantness. I'd stop keeping her son from her. She'd stop sharing information about my past. We'd move forward. I called it blackmail but polite. She said she preferred to call it a mutual agreement. I told her to get out. She said to think about it. Really think about it. Because the baby was coming soon, and once she was here, this fight would affect her. Every holiday, every birthday, every family event. She'd grow up watching her father's family torn apart. She asked if that was what I wanted. I repeated that I wanted her to leave. She stood up, placed a piece of paper on the coffee table. She said it was her phone number. When I was ready to be reasonable, I could call her. After she left, I looked at the paper. On the back, she'd written to think about what was best for the baby. My husband came home an hour later. I told him what happened. He went upstairs, changed the locks on all the doors, and installed a security camera at the front entrance. He said she wasn't getting in again, but she didn't need to get in. She had other ways to reach us. The gifts kept coming. Baby items left on the porch. Clothes, toys, a bassinet. All with notes about how excited she was to be a grandmother. My husband called her, told her to stop. She cried, said she was just trying to help, that she wanted to support us. He said support meant respecting their boundaries. She said she was respecting them. She was staying away just like he asked. She was just leaving gifts. She asked what was wrong with that. Nothing, on the surface. But it felt like a manipulation, like she was establishing presence. Making sure we couldn't forget about her. Couldn't pretend she wasn't there, waiting. At 38 weeks, my water broke. We grabbed the hospital bag and drove in silence. The contractions started in the car. Strong, consistent. The baby was coming whether we were ready or not. Labor lasted 16 hours. My husband stayed the entire time, held my hand, reminded me to breathe. When the baby finally arrived, a girl, she was perfect. Tiny fingers, dark hair, screaming at the top of her lungs. We named her Vivian, after nobody. A name that was just hers. The nurse took her for tests. My husband followed. I lay in the hospital bed, exhausted, trying to process that I was someone's mother now, that my life had just completely changed, that everything I'd been fighting for all these months was suddenly real. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number congratulating me on the baby, saying they heard she was beautiful. My mother-in-law. Somehow she already knew. I blocked the number. 10 minutes later, another text from a different number saying she just wanted to meet her granddaughter, asking me not to keep her from her. I blocked that one too. My husband came back with Vivian. They'd cleaned her up, weighed her, done all the tests. She was healthy, perfect. He placed her in my arms and she looked up at me with dark eyes that didn't quite focus yet. He said we did it. I agreed. He said she was amazing. I agreed again. We spent the first night in the hospital, just the three of us, learning how to change diapers, how to swaddle, how to tell when she was hungry versus when she just wanted to be held. It was overwhelming and exhausting and perfect. The next morning, a delivery arrived. Flowers, massive arrangement. The card read that it was to her beautiful granddaughter, with love from Grandma. My husband took them straight to the nurse's station, asked them to distribute them to other rooms. We didn't want them. More deliveries came throughout the day. Balloons, more flowers, a giant stuffed bear, all from her, all with cards about how much she loved her granddaughter, how she couldn't wait to meet her, how family was everything. On day 2, she showed up at the hospital. My husband's sister called to warn us. She said their mom was on her way. She was insistent on seeing the baby. My husband went to the nurse's station, explained the situation. They added a note to our chart. No visitors except approved family. My mother-in-law's name was not on the approved list. She arrived an hour later. We heard her in the hallway, arguing with the nurses, demanding to see her granddaughter, crying about how her son was being cruel, how she'd done nothing wrong, how she just wanted to hold the baby. The nurses stood firm. Hospital policy. No unapproved visitors. She could file a complaint with administration if she had concerns. She did exactly that. Filed a formal complaint claiming she was being discriminated against, that her son was being manipulated by his wife, that she had rights as a grandmother. The hospital administration reviewed it, looked at our chart, saw the CPS investigation, and sided with us. But it made waves. Nurses started looking at us differently, wondering what the full story was. We went home on day 3, installed a car seat, drove carefully, brought our daughter home to a house that felt different now, smaller. More important, we were parents, responsible for keeping this tiny person alive. My mother-in-law's car was parked across the street. She got out as we pulled into the driveway. She called out, asking us to please just let her see her, just for a minute. My husband carried the car seat inside while I blocked her path. I told her she needed to leave. She said she was her granddaughter. She had a right. I said she had no rights. Not until she earned them. She asked why I wouldn't let her, saying she was trying to make things right. I explained it was because she couldn't be trusted. Because every time we tried to move forward, she found a new way to hurt us. She looked past me, trying to see through the open door, trying to catch a glimpse of the baby. She threatened to go to court, to fight for grandparent rights. I told her to do it, but she wasn't seeing her today. I went inside, locked the door, watched through the window as she sat in her car for an hour before finally driving away. The first weeks with Vivian were a blur of sleepless nights and constant feeding. My husband took paternity leave. We existed in a cocoon, just us, learning how to be parents, figuring out this tiny person who'd taken over our lives. My mother-in-law tried everything. She sent gifts we donated. She called my husband's work, leaving messages about how worried she was. She showed up at the house randomly, trying to catch us leaving so she could see the baby. We started varying our schedule, taking different routes to the pediatrician, keeping the curtains closed. It felt like living in hiding, like we were prisoners in our own home. But every time we considered giving in, letting her meet Vivian just to end the chaos, we remembered everything she'd done, the investigation, the blackmail, the attempt to destroy me, and we held firm. At Vivian's 2-month checkup, the pediatrician asked if she'd met her grandmother yet. I said no. The doctor looked concerned. She said family support was really important for new parents. She asked if everything was okay. I didn't know how to explain it, how to condense months of manipulation into a sentence that would make sense. I said it was complicated. She said if I needed resources, support groups, counseling, to just let her know. More judgment. More people thinking we were the problem, that we were keeping a grandmother from her rightful place for no good reason. My husband's sister came to visit, brought gifts for the baby, held Vivian and cooed over her. Then she said their mom was really struggling. She was depressed, wouldn't leave the house. Their dad was worried about her. My husband said he was sorry she was struggling, but that didn't change anything. His sister said she was his mother, their mother, Vivian's grandmother. This couldn't go on forever. He said it could go on as long as it needed to. His sister left upset. More family tension, more people forced to choose sides. My mother-in-law had successfully positioned herself as the victim, the poor grandmother being cruelly denied access to her grandchild by an unstable daughter-in-law with a dark past. When Vivian was 3 months old, we received a letter from a lawyer. Not the same one as before. A different firm, specializing in grandparents' rights. My mother-in-law was suing for court-ordered visitation. We hired our own lawyer, spent money we didn't have on legal fees. The case moved slowly through the system. Depositions, filings, both sides presenting their arguments. She claimed alienation. We presented the investigation, the blackmail attempts, the harassment. The judge ordered mediation. We sat across a table from my mother-in-law and her lawyer, a mediator trying to find common ground. She asked what a resolution would look like for both parties. My mother-in-law said she wanted to see her granddaughter. Regular visits, without supervision, just a normal grandmother relationship. My husband said we wanted her to respect our boundaries, to stop the harassment, to acknowledge that she caused real harm and needed to rebuild trust before she got access to our daughter. The mediator looked between us. She suggested starting with supervised visits. Short meetings in a neutral location. See if we could build from there. I wanted to say no, to refuse completely, but our lawyer had warned us. If we seemed unreasonable, unwilling to compromise at all, the judge might side with her, might order visitation anyway. At least this way, we had some control. We agreed to 1 supervised visit per month, 2 hours, at a family therapy office, with a counselor present. My mother-in-law agreed to stop all harassment. No more gifts. No more showing up at the house. No more manipulative messages. The first visit was tense. Vivian was 4 months old by then, not old enough to remember this. We sat in a room with neutral beige walls while my mother-in-law held our daughter and cried. She kept saying how beautiful she was, how much she'd missed. The counselor watched carefully, made notes. After the 2 hours, we packed up Vivian and left. My mother-in-law tried to hug my husband. He stepped back and said they were following the agreement. That was all. The second visit went similarly. By the third, my mother-in-law seemed to relax. She played with Vivian, talked about normal things, almost acted like a regular grandmother. Almost. Then, at the end of the 4th visit, as we were leaving, she said quietly to my husband that she still had those photos, that information, just so he knew. The counselor didn't hear, but I did. So did my husband. And just like that, we realized nothing had changed. She was playing along, behaving, but the threat was still there, hanging over us, waiting. We told our lawyer. She said there wasn't much we could do. We couldn't prove the comment. It was her word against ours. And since she'd been complying with the agreement, the court would likely continue the visits. We were trapped, forced to hand our daughter over once a month to someone who was still actively threatening us, still holding my past over our heads like a weapon, still trying to control our lives. At Vivian's 6-month checkup, I broke down in the pediatrician's office, sobbed in the exam room while she sat there with her clipboard. I said I couldn't keep doing this. I felt like I was drowning, like no matter what we did, she won. The doctor referred me to a therapist, started me on medication for postpartum depression. My husband picked up even more hours at work to pay for everything. The legal fees, the therapy, the medications. We were barely surviving financially. My mother-in-law knew it too, started making comments during visits about how stressed we looked, how tired, how she'd be happy to help if we just let her, how she had resources, money, time, all available to us if we'd only stop being so stubborn. The manipulation never ended. It just took different forms. When Vivian turned 8 months old, my mother-in-law filed a motion to increase visitation, argued that the relationship was going well and she should get unsupervised time. Our lawyer fought it, presented evidence of the continued threats. The court sided with us, keeping the supervised schedule, but it cost us another $3,000 in legal fees. We were drowning. I went back to work part-time, found a job at a different hospital. My employment record still had the termination on it, but enough time had passed that some places were willing to overlook it. My new boss knew the full story, chose to believe me, said everyone deserved a second chance. But the stress of working, parenting, and managing the ongoing legal battle was crushing. My husband and I barely spoke anymore. When we did, it was about logistics. Who was picking up Vivian? Who was paying which bill? Who was handling the latest motion from my mother-in-law's lawyer? We started couples therapy, added another expense to our mountain of debt, sat in another beige room with another counselor, trying to figure out how to save our marriage from the pressure that was tearing it apart. Our therapist said we weren't the enemy. She was. Not to let her divide us. We knew that. But knowing it and living it were different things. Some nights I'd lie awake wondering if we should just give in, let her have what she wanted, stop fighting. It would be easier, less expensive, less exhausting. But then I'd think about what she'd done, the investigation, the blackmail, the threats, and I'd remember that people like her don't stop when you give in. They just push harder, take more. I couldn't let my daughter grow up thinking that kind of manipulation was acceptable, so we kept fighting. Month after month, visit after visit, one supervised appointment at a time, watching my mother-in-law play the loving grandmother while we all knew what she really was. Vivian's first birthday came. We threw a small party, just us and a few close friends. Didn't invite the extended family because we didn't want the drama. Didn't tell anyone until after. Posted one photo on social media because we wanted to remember the day. My mother-in-law's friends started commenting, asking why they weren't there, saying how sad it was that Vivian's grandmother had missed such an important milestone. My mother-in-law shared the photo with a long caption about being excluded from her granddaughter's life, playing the victim again. We started getting messages from people we barely knew, telling us we were being cruel, that family was important, that we should forgive and move on. None of them knew the full story. They just saw what she wanted them to see. The pressure was constant, relentless. Some days I wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake 7 years ago, when I'd decided to start over instead of dealing with my past. If I'd just been honest from the beginning, maybe none of this would have happened. But then I remembered who I'd been, broken, scared, barely surviving, and I'd built something from that. A life, a family, a daughter who would never have to experience what I'd gone through. That had to be worth the fight. When Vivian was 15 months old, my mother-in-law violated the agreement. She showed up at our house unannounced, banged on the door until we answered, demanded to see her granddaughter. My husband called the police. They escorted her away, gave her a warning about trespassing. We filed a motion to end the visits, presented evidence of the violation. The court reduced her visitation to once every 2 months. Still supervised. She appealed. Lost. Filed another motion. Lost again. But she wouldn't stop. Every few months, a new legal action. A new attempt to get more access, more control. Our lawyer bills mounted. We refinanced the house to pay for it all. Went deeper into debt. But we held firm. Now Vivian is 2 years old. She barely knows her grandmother. Doesn't cry when we leave her at the supervised visits anymore because they're so infrequent she doesn't form attachments. My mother-in-law has started talking about how we've damaged their relationship, how when Vivian is older, she'll resent us for keeping them apart. Maybe she will. Maybe someday my daughter will ask why her grandmother isn't more involved in her life, and I'll have to explain everything. Show her the photos, the investigation report, the threatening messages, prove that I was protecting her, not being cruel. Or maybe she'll understand without all that. Maybe she'll see her father and me, still together, still fighting, still building the family we want. And she'll know that sometimes love means setting boundaries, that sometimes protecting someone means making hard choices that other people don't understand. I don't know yet how this ends, if my mother-in-law will ever give up, if we'll spend the next 16 years in and out of court, if Vivian will grow up in the shadow of this war. All I know is that I made a choice to protect my daughter from someone who tried to destroy me, and I'd make that choice again, every single time, no matter the cost. The visits continue, every 2 months like clockwork. We drive to the therapy office, hand Vivian over, and wait in the car for 2 hours. My mother-in-law sits in that beige room and plays grandmother, reads books, brings age-appropriate toys, acts like she's won something. But Vivian doesn't run to her with excitement, doesn't cry when we pick her up. She's polite but distant, like she can sense that something about this arrangement isn't normal. My husband and I have built a routine around the chaos. Work, daycare pickup, dinner, bath time, bedtime. We take turns waking up with Vivian when she has nightmares. We've learned to communicate in shorthand because full conversations feel like a luxury we can't afford. The marriage isn't what it was. It's harder, more tested, but it's still there. The debt keeps growing. Our lawyer sends invoices every month, court fees, filing fees, expert witness fees. When my mother-in-law tried to argue I was psychologically unfit and needed evaluation. We passed that evaluation, cost us $2,000. My mother-in-law started a blog last month. Doesn't name us directly, but tells her story. The grandmother cruelly cut off from her grandchild by a daughter-in-law with a troubled past. She's gained followers. Other grandparents who feel alienated, they comment with support, share her posts, create an echo chamber where she's the hero and we're the villains. Someone from the blog found my work email, sent me a message calling me selfish, asking how I could keep an innocent child from her grandmother. I deleted it, then blocked the sender, then checked the blog, and saw dozens more people had joined since last week. My husband wants to respond, to tell our side publicly. Our lawyer advised against it, said it would only escalate things, make us look defensive. But it's hard watching her control the narrative, watching strangers who know nothing about us decide we're monsters. Vivian started talking more, full sentences now. She calls us Mama and Dada. Asked last week why the other lady at the office isn't like her friends' grandmas, why they only see her in that room with the boring walls. I didn't know how to answer. Said that sometimes relationships are complicated, that we're doing what we think is best for her. She seemed to accept that. Went back to coloring. But the question lingered. How long can we explain away the abnormality of this situation before she starts to internalize that something is wrong? My mother-in-law bought a house 3 blocks from us last month. Didn't tell us until we saw her car parked on what used to be a stranger's driveway. She waved when we drove past, smiled like she'd won some victory. Now we see her everywhere. At the grocery store, at the park, outside Vivian's daycare, just watching, never approaching, never violating the court order. Just present, always present. A constant reminder that she's not going away. My husband filed a restraining order. The judge denied it, said she wasn't technically doing anything illegal. She was allowed to live where she wanted, shop where she wanted, exist in public spaces. The fact that those spaces overlapped with ours wasn't grounds for legal action, so we adjust again. Find a new grocery store farther away, a new park. Consider switching daycares, but Vivian loves her teachers and we can't afford the disruption. My therapist says we're exhibiting signs of hypervigilance, that constantly looking over our shoulders isn't healthy, that we need to find ways to reclaim our sense of safety. But how can we feel safe when she's literally bought a house on our street? The legal bills hit $20,000 last month. We're paying the minimum on credit cards, skipping maintenance on the car, putting off dental work because the insurance doesn't cover enough. We're drowning financially, but we can't stop fighting because stopping means giving in. My mother-in-law knows this too. Her lawyer mentioned during the last hearing that perhaps we'd be more amenable to increased visitation if we weren't spending so much money on legal fees. If we just agreed to what she wanted, we could all move forward. Save money, reduce stress. It was a trap disguised as a kindness. And we saw right through it. Vivian is in preschool now, 3 years old, and asking why some kids have grandmas who pick them up from school and bring them cookies, why hers only sees her in the boring room. I explain again that families are different, that what matters is love and safety, that sometimes people who should be safe aren't, that we're protecting her even if she doesn't understand yet. She nods, trusts us, but I can see the confusion, the wondering. And I know that as she gets older, those questions will get harder to answer. My mother-in-law started attending Vivian's preschool events. She's allowed to. They're public. She sits in the back during the holiday concert, watches the class play, takes photos, doesn't approach us but makes sure we see her there, makes sure Vivian sees her too. Vivian asked after the last concert if the lady in the back was her grandma, said she looked like the lady from the boring room. I confirmed that yes, that was her grandmother. Vivian asked why she didn't sit with us. I said because things were complicated right now, but maybe someday they wouldn't be. It was the best answer I could give, the most honest answer that a 3-year-old might understand. The truth is, I don't know if things will ever not be complicated. My mother-in-law hasn't changed. She's just gotten better at playing the long game, better at looking reasonable to outsiders while maintaining her campaign of control. She sent Vivian a birthday card last month, addressed it to our house. Inside was a check for $1,000 and a note about hoping Vivian had a wonderful day, hoping that someday they could celebrate together properly. My husband wanted to rip it up, throw it away, but our lawyer said we had to document everything, so we scanned the card, deposited the check into a savings account we opened in Vivian's name. Money she'll have access to when she's 18. Money we won't touch no matter how desperately we need it, because using it would feel like accepting something from her, like owing her something. And we've learned that everything with her comes with strings attached. My parents called last week, first time in months. They'd seen my mother-in-law's blog, wanted to know if what she was saying was true. If I really had a criminal past I'd hidden. If I really was keeping their granddaughter from her other grandmother. I explained the whole situation, the abuse, the name change, the investigation, the blackmail, the ongoing harassment. My dad was quiet for a long time. Then he said that maybe I should just let her see Vivian more. That life was too short for this kind of conflict. That family mattered. I reminded him that they hadn't met Vivian either. That they lived 6 states away and had visited once in 3 years. That they weren't exactly models of family involvement. He said that was different. They were busy. They had lives. I said so did we. And we were protecting our daughter from someone who'd proven she couldn't be trusted. He said I was being stubborn. My mother got on the line and agreed. Said I'd always been difficult. That this was just another example of me making things harder than they needed to be. I hung up, blocked their numbers, added them to the list of people who didn't understand and never would. My husband found me crying in the bathroom that night, asked what happened. I told him about the call. He held me and said he was sorry, that we'd figure this out together, that we always did. But I'm tired. So tired of fighting, tired of defending myself, tired of watching my daughter grow up in the middle of a war she didn't ask for and doesn't understand. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd never changed my name, never tried to start over, never met my husband. Would I be happier? Would I have avoided all this pain? But then I look at Vivian, at her smile and her laugh and her questions about why the sky is blue and where clouds come from. And I know that every hard thing I've ever done led me to her. And she's worth it all. The supervised visits continue. My mother-in-law plays her role. We play ours. Vivian exists somewhere in between, not quite understanding, but sensing the tension. The therapist who supervises has started suggesting family therapy, says we need to work through our issues for Vivian's sake. We agreed. Not because we think it will change anything, but because refusing makes us look unreasonable. So we sit in another office with another mediator and listen to my mother-in-law talk about how much she loves her granddaughter, how sorry she is that things have gotten so complicated, how she just wants a chance to be a real grandmother. She cries. She's good at crying. The therapist looks at us expectantly, waiting for us to soften, to give in, to meet her halfway. But we remember what halfway looks like with her. It looks like control, like manipulation, like agreeing to something that seems reasonable until we realize we've given up more than we got. So we nod, say we'll consider it, then leave and go back to our lives. Back to the routine we've built around protecting our daughter from someone who still hasn't acknowledged the harm she caused, who still holds my past like a loaded gun pointed at my head. I don't know how long we can keep this up, the fighting, the legal bills, the constant vigilance, but I know we're not giving up, because giving up means letting her win, and I won't let her teach my daughter that manipulation and control are acceptable. Even if it costs us everything, even if we spend the next 15 years in and out of court, Even if Vivian grows up resenting us for the boundaries we set, at least she'll grow up safe, protected, loved, and sometimes that has to be enough.